Senator Margaret Carter from Shreveport, Louisiana, to Portland, Oregon, is a tale of resilience and groundbreaking achievements. Born in 1935 into a Christian family, she grew up during the Great Depression. Margaret's academic prowess was evident from a young age, skipping grades and excelling in oratorical contests. Despite facing social challenges and discrimination, she used her intellect and voice as her weapons, guided by her mother's advice to use words, not tears. Her early experiences with the NAACP ignited a lifelong commitment to civil rights and community service.
I was born in Shreveport, Louisiana in 1935 to the parents of Emma Carter, and my stepfather helped to raise me, Hilton Hunter. He was a minister. And in growing up with such Christian-oriented people, I started taking music and played piano for my father's church at 15. Growing up in Louisiana during those times were quite interesting because we didn't have manufacturing and that kind of stuff. And what I mean about that kind of stuff, I mean things that would give the average Black person who was uneducated, who did not finish college, a job opportunity. So my father, and I didn't refer to him as my stepfather, my father, Hilton Hunter, was a minister and a home builder. And as a home builder, he basically worked and built homes for white people because during those times it was 6 years beyond the big 1929 economic struggle that we had in this country. So jobs were not plentiful at that time. But the reason I didn't know it was a very unfruitful time was because as a minister, when my father could not work building homes, he always was given food from the church. So people would kill a cow or kill a hog, and we would have pork chops or we'd have steaks. And we don't know about that bigger world out there. We didn't know that so many people were poor, and because we were eating things that didn't fall in the line of being poor. So it was quite an interesting time in growing up in Shreveport, even though there was the big depression, like I said, in 1929, the big economic slump, and because we still ate as a result of who my father was as a minister and as a home builder. It was interesting because it was 9 of us. Actually, it was 8 of us because my older sister died at 5. It was 8 of us in the household, 5 girls and 3 boys. And so we didn't have a hard time because as a home builder, my father made sure that we had enough room to sleep when most houses in Shreveport at that time were just 4 rooms, which was your living room, your bedroom, and if you were lucky, a couple of bedrooms, and your kitchen. So it was quite an interesting time growing up during those years because that's 1941, because I was born in 1935. But in 1941, at 6 years of age, I began to be interested in politics with my mom because my mom worked with the NAACP and went from door to door seeing if people were registered to vote. And I was too small, even though I was 6, but they wouldn't take me in school. So I didn't start school until I was 7 years of age. And by the time my mother was going door to door, I was going with her holding all of the paraphernalia that she had for people to vote. And you'd be surprised how scary people were to vote, because the white people they work for would say, don't you be going out there with all those other black people making a big mess in this city, because you won't have a job if you do that. So many black people were scared to let the people that they work for know that they were voting. And so it's like you had to keep it a secret. But it was interesting because a lot of things did happen as a result of people voting, even though they couldn't hide their voting abilities once they went and registered. And so my mom was teaching them how to read the information about people who were running for office. And at that time, I never saw a black person in office until I was an adult, at least 21 years of age, because, the Ku Klux Klan was just rampant in our city, and people were afraid. I had finally started school at age 7, but because I knew how to read when I went there, my older brother was in the military, and he'd come home and he'd ask what was I reading every time. And that's how the older kids did help the younger kids in my family. And so when I got to school, I already knew how to read. And I remember my teacher, Mrs. Fisher, was an outstanding lady who played piano for the church and would teach people how to sing. And in my first year in school, I was in the choir at school. Now, that's really interesting because no other first grader was there, but because I had this big voice, they allowed me to sing in the choir at the age of 7, and when no other first graders were in the choir. I made double grades that year because I was reading above most of the other kids, and went from the first to the third grade. And from third grade, I went to fourth grade, where I met my big inspiration, even until this day, Mrs. Smith. She loved oratorical contests. And so she said, I like your voice, kid, so I want you to spend some time with me. And from the fourth grade through 8th grade was still in elementary school in those days. And she worked with me, and from the 4th through the 8th grade, I won first place in every oratorical contest that we had. She was very specific about enunciating and pronouncing words as they should be. And that's why in my family, I was kind of different, because the other kids did not have a Mrs. Smith to go to. And so I always spoke differently than the other kids in my family. And I think people call it, as one white lady said to me, where did you learn to speak like that? And I said, in school. And she would say, I'm not used to Negroes speaking like that. And I always found myself being in situations where people either disliked when I talk, or they liked when I talk, and because it was different. But it was all because of Mrs. Smith, who was really gung-ho, and even she didn't sound like her other colleagues either. So, so she really nurtured my voice and my ability to pronounce words and to enunciate words as well. So I went on to from there, and I skipped 5th grade and went to 6th grade. And in doing that, I was always seen as this quote unquote little skinny mouthy girl. I was called skinny, I bet, throughout high school because I was just a straight up beanpole. And it was quite interesting because I always felt like I was outside of the other group, because people would always call me a beanpole, or either because my face was thin, they would call me that little pop-eyed girl and things of that nature. So elementary school was good academically, but socially, I suffered. But I tried to overcome that in many ways. And one day my oldest brother came home from the military. My brothers all are Navy people. And my brother said, Mom, if that little girl could not sing and speak so well, she'd be an ugly little girl. And I remember crying and everybody else was laughing because in our family, I can truly say we were people that were funny and we laughed at things and not knowing we were hurting people all the time, but that was hurtful. And in crying, my mother called me in the room and she said, I want this to be the last day you cry because someone made fun of you or someone said something about you being so skinny. And she said, next week, we're going to the library and I want you to learn to read even better than you know how to read now. And I want you to use your words, not your tears. And from that day forward, I found myself not being upset because I wanted to prove that I'm smarter than you are. So why are you trying to make fun of me? And not use it in a way that was derogatory, being smarter, but something to get back at them for how they were treating me socially. I didn't even have a boyfriend, you guys, until I was a senior in high school. Most other girls had boyfriends because everybody thought I was so skinny and I was pop-eyed and all that kind of stuff. But during that time, because I had started playing piano for the church, and then I got connected with a semi-professional singing group, and we were the first singing group on radio, in musical singing group on radio back in those days. Now, we had our quartets who had already been there, but a musical singing group, we did not. So my group was the Mount Calvary Gospel Singers, and we were on radio every Sunday morning. So along with playing piano for the church and singing in the semi-professional singing group, we sung in Arkansas, Louisiana, and Texas, and we were invited one time to Chicago and one time to California during those days to sing. So my life was filled with the church and the singing group. So I didn't have time to socialize like most young people and young women in my age group. But I didn't know that I was missing something because I enjoyed the church and I enjoyed our gospel singing group so much that I never felt as if I missed anything at all. In high school, I did not have a Mrs. Smith. By that time, my confidence level was high enough, winning all the oratorical contests and singing on the radio and that kind of stuff. I had already kind of made my place, I had staked my stick. I had staked my position in life by the time I was in high school because I was working with adults and did not feel as if I was missing anything at that age. And no, I did not have a boyfriend in high school either. But again, I just felt as if I wasn't missing anything as a result of where I was in life at that point. I was writing well by that time. I was good in English. My weakness was math, and you'd be surprised how in those days you didn't hear the word tutors in school, but my brother worked with me to get me through math, and I was able to manage. I might not have made A's in math, but I certainly didn't go any later than a B, any lower than a B, because my mother would always say, listen, I'm not paying my money for you to go to school and get C's, because you can sit in class every day and get a C. Now, if you don't come home with at least a C plus and above, you're going to have to spend more time and less on books and less play. So she was and she would tell all the kids once they got to high school. My mom was named Emma, and she said, in Emma Carter's household, you graduate from high school, period. And if you don't graduate from high school, you're going to get a job or you're going to go to the military. And those were the kind of options that Black people had in a place like Shreveport, because there was not a lot of job opportunities. Because, as I said before, the biggest industry that we had there was a meat packing company, and most Black guys worked in the packing company, and that was certainly not an inspiration for little kids like me who had talent and wanted to go on and do other things. I received a scholarship from the Louisiana Education Association to go to Grambling, but I didn't go my first year out of high school. I was so engaged in my singing with the singing group that I went to business college. They had a business college, Spalding Business College in Shreveport. I'm surprised I remember the name, but it was Spalding Business College, and I went to business school. Didn't like it after I got there, but I stayed for a year, and then I went to Grambling and used my scholarship in music. Did not graduate, got married, and then left college and started having children. And then by this time, an industry had come to the Louisiana area. It was where you made ammunition. And so I started working there because the pay was good. And I started working there. And I think I worked there about 4 years until I got real scared because one of my friends somebody had missed one of the bullets on the line and blew the line up and people died. So I left the ammunition plant and just stayed home. My husband was in the military and I was still playing piano for the churches there. So that's how I finished my life story in terms of the workplace in Shreveport, was playing piano for the church and singing with the gospel, with Mount Calvary Gospel Singers. Finished 2.5 years at Grambling, and coming to Portland was not an intent of mine, but I had this dream. I was then going through a lot of domestic violence. My husband had been in the Air Force, and he was stationed in Vietnam. And he would come home, but he became violent, just violent. And as I look back now, what I think I see is a man who was affected by Operation Orange. Agent Orange was a kind of gas, but they were not checking Black veterans for that in those days. That Black soldiers always have been on the front lines of war. And it bothered me because here's a man who needs to take care of a wife and 5 children, but his mental condition that he didn't even know he had affected so many Black soldiers in this country. And that's where the greatest thing about racism has affected our community, the Black community, and many of our soldiers did not receive any kind of money to help them to go through this process, nor take care of them. My husband never received a disability check, yet he should have, because that was a very debilitating disease that affected Black men in this country. And I'm sure that I was not the only wife who was going through domestic violence at that time, because many of the men were so affected by Agent Orange that it just did not fit our community in a way that was without violence. I do believe now, as I look back, that he was a victim of the military with that kind of behavior, but they were not letting Black soldiers at that time go to counseling and that kind of stuff, because they meaning the government did not recognize people with Operation Orange. They had to go through Congress, and that was finally done in the 70s, I think it was, about the effects of Operation Orange on the United States military. So, but I had to escape that. It was really, really damaging. I had a broken jawbone, and I had to run for my life on several occasions. I was bruised like I said, on my right cheekbone from where he had hit me. He just had these anger fits, and you didn't know when they were coming. And so I had this dream that I was in this faraway place. I just so totally unknown by me at the moment, but it had beautiful red flowers, and those red flowers just stood out so much, and I could see the ocean, and I could see what I thought was the forest, and it was really quite interesting and quite beautiful. And in this dream, I was advised to go on the right-hand side of the bed, and in those days, that's where you kept sweaters and those kind of stuff, because you didn't have big closets. And so I looked in this box, and there was a number of a friend of mine that had left Shreveport 10 years before 1967. And I called them and I asked them, where were they? She said, you called Portland, Oregon, and we're still here. And she said, you sound sad, Margaret. I said, I am sad. Jerry just got out of the hospital with a broken jawbone where my husband hit me. She said, you don't have to take that. You come here with us. And she told me, I said, well, how does Portland, Oregon look? She said, we have the most beautiful red roses. And we even help with giving roses to the January, Rose Festival. And it's just beautiful, Margaret. You just come. And so we hung up, and she called me back, and she said, bring the children, because Portland rains a lot, and you might want to go back. So bring the children with you so you can have a place to stay with us. We'll sleep on pallets like we used to do when we were kids and everything, but you just come. That was on a Wednesday. And that Saturday, I had picked up my check from work and got my money from the church, and 5 little kids and me in 1967 boarded a train for Portland, Oregon. We didn't know Portland, Oregon from any other state in the country. My mom did not want me to go, but she said, I do understand. And 5 little kids and I got on the train on a Saturday, and on December the 7th, that Tuesday, we arrived in Portland, Oregon. And it was quite interesting because in those days, you couldn't afford to eat, and plus they didn't let you eat until white people had eaten anyway. And the train car. And I had a little bag, little brown bags with chicken in it. You can see the grease on the outside of the bag. You know how that looked. You guys don't because you're younger. But that's just the way it looked, with greasy bags with chicken and cake and fruit in it for the kids if they were to get hungry, because I was worried about my money when I had so many days to be riding on the train with them. But we successfully arrived in Portland, Oregon. The train ride, by the way, was a very, very great experience. I met the guys who were the porters, and once they would get through doing what they were doing, they'd come and get me and the kids, and they'd fix us some potatoes or something of that nature to eat so we could have warm food. Great experience. We arrived on that Tuesday, and that next Monday, I was out looking for a job and got a job at the 88-cent store. And at the 88-cent store, I worked in the back, and because it was December and close to Christmas, I was wrapping gifts for people who were buying stuff and getting paper ready for the whole occasion. Because the one thing about us as a nation is, Black people as a nation of people, we do believe in having our Christmas trees and Christmas ensembles and everything together. And so that's what I would have to prepare at the 88-cent store. My plan was to go back to school and teach school. But that January, now just 1 month after I was here, this guy, I'll never forget him. And he's a local Portlander who's deceased now, but his name was Tom Wilson. Tom Wilson said, I heard about you and that you haven't been able to get a job. He said, well, I'm going to introduce you to one of Portland Public Schools' best. And her name was Martha Jordan, who was a very prim and proper, well-dressed teacher who reminded me of Mrs. Smith back in Shreveport. And she got me on as a teacher aide. So in January, I got a teacher's aide position at Highland Elementary School, which is now King Elementary School. And from there, everything just started making a move upward. So the principal liked the way that I was teaching the kids to read, because they were teaching by sound pattern, and I had been taught differently. And so pronunciation and enunciation came back from 4th grade up to my life as an adult. And he told me he wanted me to go see a friend of his, and that friend was the Honorable Mary Wendy Roberts. That name is a very famous name in Oregon because the Roberts were all in the legislature, were judges, and that kind of stuff. So it was quite an experience for me. But what's interesting, even in Portland, Oregon, I already have 2.5 years of college. And they made me go through a vocational testing system. Now, I don't know what vocational testing had to do with the academic life that I was trying to pursue, but I did it. And then they sent me through another academic test where, I had to pronounce words, I had to give meanings of words, and I passed it so well. And one white lady said, who is this Margaret Carter? How does she speak? They even had the speech teacher from Portland State to listen to me, to tell the people why I spoke the way I spoke. And they didn't even want, at first, they didn't even want to help sponsor me because they felt that I was putting on. And so then they would call me at different times to see how I would talk. Now, this is Portland, Oregon, and I want you to know this is 1984. 1984, when I had to pass the test of the white women in their organization that I was not putting on, that I really speak the way I speak. So it kind of was nothing different because I was tested like that in Louisiana as a kid in school. You know, I don't know why I speak like I speak. I just speak like I speak. But I'm questioned a lot about that, especially when they knew that I was born and raised in the South. But I didn't care. You have to understand about me. I don't care what I have to go through to get where my goal is in life. I will step over hot fire and brimstone to get where I want to go. I'm just that determined in my life. And all of that came from all the experiences that I had early on in my life. Finally, the governor who was of the state had given some money for women like me, mothers who were single, had children, wanted to go back to college. And so I applied for that and went back to Portland State and finished my undergraduate degree, and then went to Oregon State to complete my master's degree. And life was just fantastic from them. I have been truly blessed. So it was an interesting life. I didn't realize the challenges that I was facing because I had such great determination, you know, about what I wanted to do and where I wanted to be. I didn't have politics in my mind. It was singing and teaching school. That's the highest I ever thought. I never thought about politics at all until I was approached by two white Republicans. And these men asked me if I would be willing to run for office. And I thought that was quite unusual because nobody from the Black community had asked me to run. And so you hear that permission talk, because I born and raised in the South, you had to have permission from the men in the community to do things. And so I grew up with that. And so the guys, Dave Barrows and Roger Martin, they said, we'll help you to raise money and everything else if you will run. So I was directing a singing group here in Portland called The Joyful Sound. And I went back and talked to our minister, by the way, who was my brother, Bill Hunter. And I asked him what he thought about it. And he gave his blessings and saying, as long as you don't desert your commitment to the Lord, we'll be there for you. I talked to the singing group and to my mom and my other family members, and everybody said, if you don't leave the work of the church, you know we're there to vote for you. And so I started on that journey, and it was really quite interesting because I was the only Black female in that race. And being in that race was really difficult because that was the first year that Bud Clark ran for mayor of our city in 1984. And there was one other white female in the race as well. And she was a little more to the left of me. And Rose Gangle was her name, a very devoted Democratic woman. And in doing so, I found myself being alone because all the men, even there were two Republicans, and the rest was Democratic men, three Democratic men. Harold Williams was one of them, and Chad Debnam, but I think he was Republican, were the black guys. And so I would get all kind of calls on my phone, get out of the race, this is a man's race. And you're just messing things up because Harold Williams could win if you were to get out of the race. And I even went to a fundraiser once where one of his people picked me up and pushed me back down on a concrete place where we were sitting. And my car was broken into, and I received cards with shrouds from a funeral home, and all kind of mail, and men, and even with other women being other black women saying that they were voting for Harold Williams because we need a man. So it was not a pretty picture when I first ran. I remember one morning about 3:00 in the morning, I just awakened. I couldn't sleep, and I was looking out of the windows at the sky and the beautiful stars in the sky, and I was crying, and it's like this little voice said, for your daughters and for every other daughter in this state, you hold fast to this race. And I held fast despite the white people who were the Democratic Socialists in the community saying, get out of the race. And then people who were supporting the black men in the race saying, get out of the race. And it was quite interesting because on so many occasions I felt so alone because I was used to black women supporting black women. But when you have a black female and a black male in the race, that's a tough decision for many wives and for many daughters and grandmothers and things. But see, I hadn't thought that broad at that particular time. It was an interesting time, but it was also a very scary time on both sides. You know, you have the Democratic Socialists over here. You have some Republicans over here, a very small group in Northeast Portland. And then you have the black men who are saying, get out of this race. It's a man's race. And I felt as if I was pulling a 500-pound bag up my shoulder every time I got a chance to speak. And on one occasion, I went to the church used to be very active where Alberta Abbey is now. And we had we had a debate. And I remember Mr. Debnam saying to the crowd, well, she just want to be down there with all those white guys. And our community can't stand somebody else like that running for them. We need somebody that's going to really support this community. And I was constantly getting those kind of comments about me. But I have to tell you, it goes back to Emma Carter, who says, use your words, not your tears. I live by that mantra today in trying to stand up for my community and stand up for who I am and what I believe. That's important to me. The community in my life comes first. And then whatever I want. But we need to learn to work in a progressive manner so that the ethics and the hard work of the women and men who came before us will not have been in vain. And I think when we work for the good of the community, then we work for a healthy nation. And if the nation is strong, then we as a people are strong. And that's, I believe in until this day, that when the nation is strong, the people work fervently and without tiring together. Oh, yeah, you get physically tired. But that mental stability is the thing that you look to keep you strong. I have 4 generations, you guys. I can't fail now. You know, I have to stay strong and live up to that mantra that Sojourner Truth and Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois and George Washington Carver and all of those people who tread the pathway of life that we might live the life that we live today. So I believe in that very strongly, and I still walk as much as I can in their shoes. Shirley Chisholm's name is up there with Sojourner Truth and many of the women who fought a trail that was very hard. Shirley Chisholm had the intestinal fortitude to dare to get in a U.S. presidential race. Now, I'm telling you, if you thought that Rosa Parks, who heard the voice of all of those white people saying, get in the back, go where you belong, nigger, get up, all of that kind of stuff. All those women who came before us, I would feel as if I let them down if I didn't stand strong today for our community and for the good of the political arena. And let me tell you, being the first Black female in this state who ran for office, the things that I went through, I have never said them publicly, but here I say, I'm telling you that my hair was felt. You must have a white sweetheart feeling my butt and taking the N-word in the legislature and listening at other people make jokes about my Blackness and about my community and about our men not standing up to the test of time to be heads of families. I did that. I took those bows and arrows, but I never let them hit me to where I fall. I took a lot of bows and arrows, but I did it for the good of our people. And I would do it all over again if I was asked to do it. And you should know that even if there were people who asked me at 88 years of age to run again for office and I thought that was a pathway, I would be right there today. Oh yeah, I would be there today. Because I think that there are still things, and especially when you start talking about economics and you talk about Black wealth, we don't hardly know what that is because we can't get a foothold onto anything. There isn't a pathway. You ask me about racism? Oh, yeah. Racism is alive and well in Portland, Oregon, and in the state of Oregon. Do not forget, Portland, Oregon, well, I should say the West Coast, was seen as an Aryan nation, where Aryan meaning white, where no Black people were supposed to be here. But they couldn't do it without Black people coming here helping during World War I. When we had the ships that needed to be built, when we needed people to help with ammunition, it was Black people who came from the South, Louisiana, Arkansas, Texas, and made Portland, Oregon a place where they live because Portland, Oregon was recruiting Black people from those places to come here and help with the war. And then our men that went to war have to come back and face the indignities of white racism, even though they were on the front lines of the war in this country. My challenges came in our community, in the Black community, because what I didn't know was that many people didn't have the level of education that I had. And so that was somewhat of a threat. My greatest challenges came once I got in the legislature and people being suspect, and white people being suspect of me allowing white men who were Republican to help me to run for office. And so I was seen as suspect for that. But was it hard in terms of the challenges? With 5 babies, you can believe that. It was not an easy thing. And I was blessed because, like I said, 5 days after I were here, I'm working. A month later, I'm in the school district. And the things that were challenging for me is finding childcare while I work, because I didn't even know anything about welfare until I went to the Department of Vocational Rehabilitation and knew that. And even then, because I was working, I was not eligible for any help. So I didn't even apply for it at that time, because I've always worked. And being a Southern girl, that's all I knew, because I never heard of no welfare in Louisiana and that kind of stuff. In Shreveport, I didn't even know they had a system as such. And so all I knew was work, work, work. And that's exactly what I did. But those challenges were great once I went to the legislature. And I was always an enigma for the white men. And so, in Salem, my staff and I were followed, were a group of white men in a truck, followed us and came into our driveway. And I had to call the police then, and they came out. And then a group of white men from Idaho came over to the state legislature and to get Margaret Carter, and the state police was there to help defend me. And then I was hung in effigy with Kay Turan on the state capitol building. So I've had my challenges. I've been followed by white men my whole time I was in the legislature and coming home, especially when I did the Martin Luther King holiday bill. I sponsored that bill. I sponsored the South African divestiture bill, and that forced Nike to bring $800 million out of South Africa. So, I've had my scary days, but I never faltered, and I was not intending to falter. One thing I want you guys to know, I remarried when I came to Portland, Oregon. And in this remarriage, I inherited 4 more kids. So I was the mother of 9 kids, like 3 sets of twins overnight. By this time, I ran for the legislature. My husband and I were divorced. And he were with the other men in the community about my running. And he said into the Scanner newspaper, well, if Margaret Carter has 9 kids, how does she have 9 kids in such a short period of time that she has been here? And my daughter, his daughter, came to me and said, Mama, don't deny us. We've gone through enough. Our mother denied us and left us, and our dad has denied us and left us. Please don't deny us. And one newspaper wanted to not interview me anymore or put my story in the paper because I refused to say my stepchildren. I don't ever say my stepchildren since that child told me that. Don't deny us. And I always say I have 9 children. And I do, because the youngest was 15 months. The next 2 were 3 and 3.5. The next 2 was 7. And then my 9 and 11-year-olds. So I had 9 children, 11 and under. at one time. And so I don't ever want that period of my life to not be told, being a mother of 9 children. And so those children, so that my children, all 9 of my children, will never feel as if they've been denied, because they went through this struggle with me all the way. The interesting thing is that our community, once the race was over, came together with glee. We had a party that was a celebration party on election night that you couldn't even get in the room. It was so crowded. We sent for people in limousines to come, the older people who could not come, and people rejoiced. The Wall Street, the New York Times wrote an article. Wall Street Journal wrote an article about Portland, Oregon electing its first Black female. And I was so unafraid on that night because our community came together, men, women, children, all came together being excited about this new journey, about having Black female representation in the legislature. Because, see, Senator McCoy was already there. He had been in the House and then in the Senate. So he had set the groundwork for other Black people to enter the halls of the state legislature. So it was an exciting time in our community. It really was. And like I said, it made national headlines. And so I felt quite good about that. And it was good for me because I could let all the negatives of running go away. And this is my really first time talking about the negatives publicly. And it's because of the wonderment of you guys and the dare to do a legacy of history about Black people in our community. And so I think for other boys and girls coming along looking at a Bill McCoy and a Margaret Carter, I think give them some hope in their lives about their future. And I'm hoping that they will take advantage of that opportunity because it was not easy, but it was worth it, for sure. I love the fact that I was able to get an economic development strategy bill through the legislature because that's the one thing I said we were lacking in Northeast Portland. And that was a bill that would give businesses that came into our community a 5-year relief from paying taxes. For the first 5 years, they paid no business taxes in our community. And that was to get them here and give opportunity to them for work. And I think one of the first companies I heard that took advantage of it was Nabisco, because they needed to modernize their system in order to hire more people. And so it was companies like that benefited, and small businesses that wanted to go to operationalize themselves took advantage of it because you didn't pay taxes for the first 5 years. Gentrification has played a big role in disrupting this community and Black people having to find housing in other parts of the state, and to use the word that many of the young people use today, out in the numbers, that where Black people hadn't ever been before. It interrupted the flow of Black people physically. But most Black people that live out in the numbers that were members of churches here, they still come to church. They are still connected in terms of activities that go on in this community. And it's like you can move the physical location of where we are, but you cannot take away the mental attitude of our Blackness away from us. We're still connected. So in that sense, I think there's still a Black community. If I had not gone into politics, I would have a doctorate degree in psychology. I wanted to be a trainer in the marketplace because I believe that most people who go to the marketplace and don't have the skills that the marketplace is looking for, that there is an in-between in terms of school and the marketplace, and that I would have some kind of program that provides opportunity for young people who wanted to work in multinational corporations. Because the multinational corporations always say, well, we can't find Black people to do this, so we can't find Black people to do that. And I think that that's an excuse for them to continue to hide their racism. And I would be the intervener of people going into multinational corporations for the workplace. When I arrived here, guys, I only had $100 in my pocket and 5 babies and no place to stay. But it just shows you with determination, with discipline in your life, there are a lot of things you can do. But the greatest word of it all is to make the self-sacrifice for where it is you want to go, and don't let no one take you off the trail that you have decided that you want to follow for successful outcome. I live with a plan. Even now in my life at 88 years of age, I still have a plan, because life is life until that day you breathe no more. My father said, even before John F. Kennedy came along, that no matter how bad you're treated in this country, you need to make sure that this country does not take away your spirit of living in America. I want the skills, the brains, the mental stability, and the intestinal fortitude of our young men like you guys are to tell our story. We don't need white people to tell our story. We don't need Hispanics. We don't need Jews. We don't need anybody else to tell our story. So my hope is that what you're doing today will be internalized in the hearts and minds of other young men and women to tell our story. We have lived our stories, and the stories that we have lived should be a pathway unto your feet.
Thanks for tuning in to Oregon Hidden Legacy. For more information about this podcast, go to OregonHiddenLegacy.org.